Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised due to emotional themes. It was around 11:30 p.m. when everything inside me just broke. I sat on the edge of the bed, barely able to breathe through the sobs that kept coming in waves. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow from the lamp on the bedside table, and all I could hear was the ticking of the clock and the sound of my own pain echoing in my chest. My husband had left the house hours ago after yet another argument, loud words, accusations, and that same cold silence that followed every time. But this time felt different. It wasn't just a fight. It was the weight of everything I had buried for months crashing down all at once. I didn't even notice the door creak open at first. I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, until I heard footsteps, slow, hesitant, almost unsure. I turned my head quickly, wiping my eyes with the sleeve of my shirt, and there he was. My husband's friend, Daniel. He looked surprised at first, like he hadn't expected to find me like this, eyes swollen, hair messy, barely holding myself together. He took a small step forward and closed the door behind him gently, as if afraid any sound might shatter me completely. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't know you were here. I was just dropping off his phone. He left it in my car." I tried to respond, but my throat felt tight. I didn't want anyone to see me like this, especially not him. Daniel was the kind of person who always seemed composed, polite, calm, always with a little smile. He was my husband's longtime friend, but we had never really shared more than a few brief conversations. So why was he standing here now, not leaving? I looked away, hoping he'd take the hint, but instead, he walked over and sat in the chair across from the bed. Not too close, but close enough for me to feel that someone was there. I didn't expect kindness. Not tonight. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice lower now, more careful. I gave a bitter laugh, one that caught me off guard. "Does it look like it?" I muttered, not meaning to be rude, but unable to hide the pain behind my words. Daniel nodded slowly. "Fair enough," he said. "But, I mean, are you safe?" That question hit differently. No one had asked me that in a long time. Not like that. Not with genuine concern. I looked at him properly now. His eyes weren't judging. They weren't curious for gossip. They just looked sincere. And that made something inside me crack a little more. I sighed. He said some things tonight. Things I can't forget. Things I shouldn't have to hear from the person I married. Daniel looked down at his hands. He was quiet for a few seconds before he spoke again. "He's been different lately. I've noticed it too. The way he talks, the way he acts around you." I never said anything because I thought maybe it wasn't my place. I didn't expect that. I always thought his friends saw him as perfect. I didn't know they noticed the changes too. "I'm not trying to pry," Daniel added quickly. I know how isolating it can feel when the person who's supposed to be your safe space becomes the one who makes you feel the most alone." I looked away, suddenly feeling vulnerable in a way I didn't plan to be tonight. But the truth was, I didn't have anyone else to talk to. And here he was, someone I barely knew, sitting here and seeing me without masks, without explanations, just broken. "I don't know how it got this bad," I whispered. "We used to be so close. And now it feels like I'm living with a stranger." Daniel leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "people grow in different directions. And sometimes, we ignore the signs because we're trying so hard to hold on to what we had." His words felt too real. Too close to what I had been thinking but didn't want to admit. The tears came back, quietly this time. I didn't bother wiping them away. He sat there quietly, not pushing, not judging. Just present. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone actually saw me. I should probably go, he said gently after a while, standing up slowly. But if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm around. You don't have to go through this alone. I nodded, not trusting my voice. And just as he turned to leave, he stopped at the door and looked back. There was something in his eyes, his concern, care, maybe even something unspoken. Take care of yourself, he said softly, then stepped out and closed the door behind him. But as I sat there in silence once again, the weight of what had just happened sank in. I had let my guard down with someone I barely knew, someone who wasn't supposed to matter, and yet, somehow, he did. The house felt heavier now. The quiet was louder. And in my heart, something had shifted. I didn't know what it meant yet, or what would happen next. But I had a feeling that tonight wasn't just about pain, it was the beginning of something I hadn't expected at all. The door clicked shut, and I sat there, frozen in place, staring at the space where Daniel had stood just seconds before. My heart was still pounding, not just from the argument with my husband earlier, but from everything that had just happened. The way Daniel looked at me, so calm, so unlike the chaos I was used to, lingered in my mind. I wasn't sure what unsettled me more, the pain I'd been carrying for months, or the sudden comfort I'd felt in the presence of someone I hardly knew. The silence in the house was unnerving. It wasn't peaceful, it felt hollow, like a void where something important used to live. My husband still wasn't home. I had stopped keeping track of the time whenever he left without explanation. The excuses had become routine, late-night meetings, hanging out with friends, needing space. Space. That word had started to feel like a wall between us, one that kept growing taller every day. I got up and slowly walked to the dresser. My reflection in the mirror made me flinch. Puffy eyes, tired skin, a look I barely recognized anymore. I used to take pride in the way I looked, in keeping myself together even on the hardest days. But lately, it felt pointless. It felt like no one saw me anymore, not even him. We weren't always like this. In the beginning, our love felt effortless. We laughed, we made plans, we leaned on each other. He used to call me in the middle of the day just to hear my voice. I remember how his eyes used to light up when I entered the room. But those days had faded like old photographs, and now I was left wondering if they were even real. Or if I had imagined them, desperately trying to hold on to a version of us that no longer existed. It wasn't just the fights. It was the silence in between. The way he scrolled through his phone during dinner, barely saying a word. The way he avoided eye contact when I brought up things that mattered to me. And the way he shut down completely whenever I asked what was wrong. I started noticing things. Small things at first. Locked phone screens, sudden mood changes, late nights that didn't make sense. I asked questions, but he always had answers. Too smooth. Too practiced. My gut told me something was off, but I kept brushing it aside. Maybe I didn't want to face the truth. Maybe I thought if I just stayed patient, things would go back to normal. But nothing had changed. If anything, it had gotten worse. That night, after Daniel left, I kept thinking about the way he had looked at me, genuinely concerned, no judgment. It made me realize how long it had been since someone treated me like I mattered. And that scared me. Because no one should feel that lonely in their own home. I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying everything. The argument earlier, the way my husband's words had cut through me like a blade. The things he accused me of, being too emotional, too needy, too controlling. Words I had never heard from him before. It was like he had become someone else entirely. And now Daniel. His timing felt accidental, but somehow it also felt important. Like he had walked in during a moment I wasn't meant to go through alone. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. My husband still wasn't home. I checked my phone, no messages, no missed calls. Nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed again, just like the night before, and stared out the window. The sky was starting to turn from black to deep gray. Another day. Another layer of pretending. Around 7 a.m., I heard the front door open. I didn't move. I just listened. His footsteps were quiet, almost cautious. He didn't come to the bedroom. I heard the fridge open, the sound of a bottle cap turning. Then silence again. When I finally walked out, he was sitting at the kitchen table, looking at his phone like nothing had happened. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. "You didn't come home," I said quietly. He didn't even look up. "I was with the guys." That was it. Just 5 words. I stared at him, trying to see if there was any guilt, any emotion, any sign that he even noticed what I had been going through. But there was nothing. Just a blank wall. "You didn't even call," I whispered. He finally looked at me then, but not with concern. More like annoyance. I didn't think I needed to. Something inside me snapped at that moment, not in anger, but in clarity. I realized I had been waiting too long for something to change, for him to wake up and see what we were losing. But he didn't care. Or maybe he had stopped caring a long time ago. He got up, grabbed his keys, and left again. Just like that. I stood in the kitchen, hands trembling, wondering how it had come to this. And more importantly, what I was going to do next. Because something had shifted in me. And I didn't know where it was leading yet. But I knew I couldn't keep living like this. Especially not after the way Daniel had looked at me. Like I was still human. Like I was still worth something. Like I mattered. And that thought stayed with me longer than I expected. I spent the rest of that morning pacing between rooms, trying to make sense of everything. My husband didn't even bother to text me the entire day. It was like I didn't exist in his world anymore. I kept going over the things he said last night, the way he dismissed me so easily, like my pain was some kind of inconvenience to him. And even though I tried to stay calm, my thoughts kept circling back to one moment, Daniel standing in my room, offering me comfort without asking for anything in return. Later that afternoon, I saw Daniel's name flash across my phone screen. A short message. "Just checking in. Hope you're okay." I stared at it for a while, unsure of how to respond. It was strange how a single text could make me feel seen. I hesitated, then typed back, "Thanks. I'm still trying to figure things out." It wasn't much, but it was honest. What followed was unexpected. A slow, quiet series of texts over the next few days. He never asked anything personal, never crossed a line. He just listened. Responded. Asked if I'd eaten. Told me silly things about his day. And slowly, I started to feel less invisible. Not fixed. Just noticed. Meanwhile, my husband continued to pull further away. His time at home grew shorter, his mood colder. I started to wonder if there was someone else. It was a thought I'd pushed away for too long, but now it kept coming back. The late nights. The locked phone. The sudden change in behavior. Something didn't feel right, and no matter how much I tried to pretend otherwise, my gut wouldn't let it go. One night, after he left the house again without saying where he was going, I found myself sitting in the kitchen, staring at his untouched dinner. I picked up his plate, scraped it into the bin, and stood there silently. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I used to be. I was just tired. Tired of hoping. Tired of guessing. Tired of being treated like a shadow in my own life. That's when my phone buzzed again. Daniel. Do you want to get out of the house for a bit? Just for some air. No pressure. I hesitated. I knew how it might look, but I also knew I needed a break from the suffocating weight of everything. So I agreed. He picked me up 20 minutes later. We didn't go far. Just a quiet coffee place on the edge of town. We sat outside, and for a while, we didn't talk about anything heavy. He told me about his nephew, about the chaos at his job, about a movie he'd watched 3 times just because it helped him sleep. And I found myself smiling. Actually smiling. Eventually, the conversation drifted to my husband. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to explain why I felt so lost. Daniel didn't offer advice. He just listened, really listened, in a way I hadn't experienced in months. I'm not trying to be in the middle of anything, he said gently. But I think you deserve to be with someone who doesn't make you feel small. His words stayed with me all night. Over the next few days, I noticed more signs. Receipts in his pockets from places I'd never been, perfume on his clothes that wasn't mine. And the more I paid attention, the clearer it became, he was hiding something. And I didn't know how much longer I could pretend not to see it. But I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to be steady. And deep down, a part of me was afraid of the truth. Because once I knew for certain, everything would change. And what scared me more was the growing part of my heart that felt safe when I thought about Daniel. The lines were starting to blur. And I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that they weren't. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and quiet discoveries. Every time my husband left the house, I watched him from the window until his car turned the corner. I hated what I had become, paranoid, distracted, constantly questioning everything. But something inside me knew the truth was getting closer, and I wasn't ready for it. His lies had become routine now, delivered so casually that it made me feel foolish for ever trusting him. One night, he left his laptop open on the dining table. It was something he never did before. I stared at it for a long time, my heart pounding. I told myself I wouldn't look. That I still had boundaries. But my fingers moved on their own, trembling as they opened the screen. His messages were right there. No password. Almost like he wanted me to see. The conversation was with a woman I didn't know. It wasn't flirty, it was worse. It was familiar. Comfortable. Like they had been talking for months. They were planning a weekend away. Somewhere we were supposed to go once. I felt my breath catch. My stomach twisted. I couldn't read anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the sound of his breathing next to me, steady and peaceful, like nothing in the world was wrong. But everything was. I was holding on to something that no longer existed. And the weight of it was suffocating. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I didn't tell anyone. I just needed space to think, to feel, to breathe. I ended up at a quiet park, far from the house, just sitting on a bench with my thoughts spinning out of control. Daniel called, sensing something was off. I didn't say much, but he offered to meet me. And without meaning to, I said yes. We talked for a long time. Not about my husband. Not about what I'd read. Just about life. And for the first time in weeks, I felt calm. But beneath the calm was a storm building inside me. Because I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Something had to break. Later that evening, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself, really looking. I wasn't weak. I wasn't lost. I was a woman pushed to her edge, and I had a choice to make. Just then, I heard the front door open. He was home early. And everything inside me went still. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, slow, measured, like he already sensed something was off. I didn't move from my spot in front of the mirror. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. He entered the room without knocking, tossing his keys on the dresser like nothing was different. But I could feel it in the air, he knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to sense the distance growing between us. He looked at me briefly, then said, "We need to talk." My breath caught. I'd prepared for this conversation all week, but hearing those words out loud still sent a jolt through me. I turned to face him, nodding slowly. But before I could say anything, he added, "I know you've been seeing someone. Don't deny it." The accusation stunned me. "What?" I whispered. "I saw the messages," he said flatly. "Your phone was on the counter the other day. Daniel's name, the way you were talking to him. Don't act innocent." The room felt like it tilted. I had expected a fight, a confession, even a cold denial of his own betrayal. But this, turning it on me, was something else. It was manipulative, cruel. And worst of all, part of me had feared it. "You're the one who's been lying," I said, my voice shaking. "I saw your messages too. I know about the weekend plans." He didn't flinch. Instead, he smirked slightly. "So what are we doing now? Just throwing accusations back and forth? Or are you going to admit you've already made your choice?" That moment was like a trap snapping shut. The lines between guilt and blame, love and betrayal, were blurring fast. And suddenly, the real question wasn't who was lying, but who had been pretending longer. I stared at him, stunned by the way he twisted everything. The room felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken anger and truths that had been simmering too long. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. For the first time, I didn't hold back. "You're right," I said quietly. "I did make a choice. And it wasn't Daniel. It was me. I chose to stop breaking myself just to make this work." He scoffed, pacing the room like he couldn't stand still. "So what now? You just walk away like none of this mattered?" I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. "It mattered. That's why it hurts so much. But I'm done fighting for someone who gave up on me first." He didn't respond. His silence said everything. The mask had finally cracked. I turned to grab my bag, my heart pounding but steady. And just as I reached for the doorknob, he said something that stopped me cold. "Daniel's not who you think he is." I turned slowly. "What are you talking about?" He hesitated, then looked me dead in the eye. He knew. About everything. I told him months ago. He covered for me. The words hit harder than I expected. My breath caught. A rush of confusion flooded me. Was that even possible? "He played both sides," he added, almost proud. "He made you trust him. Clever, right?" I didn't answer. My chest tightened with a different kind of pain now, betrayal layered on top of betrayal. As I walked out the door, I didn't know what was real anymore. But one thing was certain, nothing in my life was what it seemed. And the truth was still unraveling. I walked out of the house without looking back, the cool evening air brushing against my face like a quiet reminder that something had ended, and something else had just begun. My husband's words echoed in my mind, twisting the trust one thought I'd found in Daniel into something uncertain. The weight of both betrayals sat heavy on my chest, but deep down, there was also a strange sense of relief. The lies were no longer hidden. The silence was finally broken. Later that night, I messaged Daniel. I didn't accuse him. I just asked one question, did you know? His reply came slowly, just one line, I made a mistake. I wanted to protect you from more pain. That was his answer, and maybe it was the truth. Maybe it wasn't. But either way, it told me everything I needed to know. I chose not to respond. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. This entire chapter of my life had been built on trusting people who were never honest with me. And now, I was finally ready to trust myself instead. In the weeks that followed, I started fresh. I found my voice again, piece by piece. I moved into a new place, focused on healing, and reminded myself every day that walking away wasn't weakness, it was survival. Some stories don't end with perfect closure. But they end with strength. And that strength becomes the beginning of something better. Because even after betrayal, heartbreak, and truth twisted in silence, I finally remembered who I was.